In this video, we're going to upgrade a project to Next.js 14 and add TypeScript. So this is part 7 of a multi-part series on building a custom audio player in React. So in part 1, we did a bulk of the work building out our custom audio player. In part 2, we did a little bit of debugging. In part 3, we added bookmarks and chapters. In part 4, we added time jumps. In part 5, we set up some additional functionality for when the user reaches the end of the audio clip, get kicked back to the beginning. In part 6, we created some custom audio hooks. And so I'll of course include links to all of these within the description below, so you can start back at the beginning if you want. Otherwise, I've also included the code for this particular video on GitHub, so you can jump in right here with me now. If you're new to the Self-Teach Me channel, my name is Amy Dutton. I'm a web designer and developer. If you're looking to get into this space, sometimes it's hard to know where to start and what resources to trust. So I want to help you level up and get to where you want to be. And if this sounds interesting to you, hit the subscribe button below. Okay, let's get this project up and running. It's been a while since I started this series, so there may be a few things that we need to do to get everything working. So let's start by going over to GitHub, and we can download the code from where the last video left off. And I'll, of course, include a link in the description below. So I'm just going to click on this code button, and I'm going to copy this HTTPS link and come over to my terminal. So this is Warp. You can download it for free online, and I'll include a link to this as well in the description. But I'm going to say git clone, and I'm going to paste in that URL. Now, when I pulled this down from GitHub, it created a folder called 0051-audio hooks. And I want to change the folder name. And so you can actually do all that within the terminal. So I can use the command mv, which is short for move. And then the first name we list is the name of the folder that we want to change. So this is going to be 0051. And hot tip, when you start typing in the terminal in Warp, I can hit the right arrow, or in a lot of other terminals, you can hit tab and it will auto-complete the name for you. And if you're like me and you have multiple folders with similar names at the beginning, once you hit tab, you'll see a list of folders that you can cycle through. You can see how that works. So I'm going to pick 0051 and I want to change that to 0052 TypeScript. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter, and now my project is in 0052. Part of the reason that all these fancy commands work within the terminal is because I'm running OhMyZSH. If you're not familiar, I'd recommend checking out Wes Boss's free course called Command Power User. It was made several years ago, but the content is close to evergreen. He goes through a lot of the tips and tricks to not only help you feel more comfortable within the terminal, but also to help you speed up your workflows and productivity. So again, I'll include a link in the description below. So I'm going to change directories and navigate into that particular folder. And now I'm going to run yarn install, which will download all of the dependencies for this particular project. So now that it's grabbed everything, I'm going to say yarn dev, and this will get our project up and running locally. So you probably hit an error just like I did. So let's talk about this particular error, how to read it and figure out what's going on and how to solve it. When you hit an error, the best thing to do is to go to the top and see what caused the error in the first place. Sometimes errors are like dominoes falling over. The first error creates more problems and causes everything else to fall over. So the best thing that you can do is try to go to the top and figure out the root of the problem. So if we scroll to the top here, you can see that it says it's using Webpack 4, and the reason is that Webpack 5 option is not enabled. So it looks like there's a version mismatch between what it wants and what it's expecting. So let's open up our code and just take a look. I'm going to say code space period, and this is a little shortcut, but the period means right here within this directory. So if I wanted to open up a specific file instead, I could say maybe package.json, but in this case, I want to open up the entire folder. So if we look at, let's make this a little bit bigger, our package.json file, and if we scroll on down and look at our dependencies, we can see that it's running Next 10. And as of last week, Next is up to version 14. Oh man. So let's upgrade it. So first, let's pull up our documentation on Next.js, and we want to upgrade to version 14. These are all the commands that we can use to upgrade, and we are using yarn. So I'm going to copy this particular command and then head back over to my terminal and paste that in. So this upgrades several packages within a single line. We're getting the latest version of Next, React, React DOM, and ESLint configured for Next. Now let's try and run yarn dev again, and we'll probably hit another error. There we go. So it says it's disabled SWC as a replacement for Babel because of a custom Babel configuration. So if we go back over to VS Code, let's take a look. So SWC is a Rust-based platform for fast developer tools, and it has to be disabled because we have this config. Well, we no longer need Babel, so I can just move that over to the trash. And actually, we're not doing any tests right now, so I'm going to get rid of our just config. And if we go into our hooks, we also have a test file here. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this as well. And let's see if there's anything else. Yep, we can get rid of this API directory. It's just a placeholder. Okay, perfect. So now let's go back over to our terminal. I'm going to hit Control-C to end the server, and then I'm going to run yarn dev again. So it looked like it was missing some SWC dependencies now and automatically patched everything for us, which is pretty great. But it is saying to run npm install just to make sure that it got everything that it needed. So I'm going to hit Control-C, and we can run yarn install one more time. And now let's run yarn dev. Awesome. And it looks like everything is good for right now. Let's try and open up our browser, and look at that. Hit some more errors, and we hit some more errors. Awesome. So if we look at this error, what it's saying is that it can't find prop types, and that's coming from our audio player file on line 2. So let's jump over to that file. So if I pull up VS Code, we go into our components, and we have our audioplayer.js file. And here at the top, we are importing our prop types. Now, this was a great way to define prop types before TypeScript. But because we're moving everything over to TypeScript, we can just go ahead and get rid of that particular line. And if we scroll down to the bottom of our file, this is also where we have our default props and our prop types definitions. So I'm going to delete those as well. So let's give this a save. And now let's jump back over to our browser and check that out. Automatically refreshed, and you can see our player has loaded. Now for the TypeScript part. Let's go over to Next documentation. So here we go. Now this top part here is for creating a new project with TypeScript enabled by default. And we already have our project. So we need to go down to the next section here for existing projects. And it says all that we need to do is we just need to rename a file to include .ts or .tsx. And it'll recognize that we're trying to use TypeScript. So let's come back over to VS Code. And since we have our audio player here, let's go ahead and change our extension here to .tsx. If you're new to TypeScript, the TSX extension is just like .jsx. And the TS extension is just like the JS extension. With JSX and TSX, you're specifying that your file has JSX inside. This special syntax here where it looks like you have HTML inside JavaScript. So now if we come back over to Next, and it says run next dev and next build to automatically install the necessary dependencies. And it'll also add a tsconfig.json file. So if you try and run next dev inside your terminal, you're probably like me and it says, hey, I can't find that particular command. But if you come over to our package.json file and you look inside of your script section, you can see that it's actually running next dev as part of our dev script and next build as part of our build step. So I'm going to come back over to the terminal and let's just run yarn build so that it will build out our project. And you can see it did a few things here, compiled successfully, created some page data, generated our static pages, created some build traces. Okay, so now let's say yarn dev, and it looks like it compiled a few things, but I still do not see my tsconfig file here in our sidebar. Let me try one more thing. So I tell you what, I'm going to come in here and let's rename some other files here to maybe help it along. Okay. So let's try this again. I'm going to say yarn build. So now if we come back over to VS Code, you'll see that it created this tsconfig.json file. So all TypeScript projects are going to have a tsconfig.json file for handling our TypeScript configuration. The main line that we care about here is 9.8 and 9.10. So here it says that, are we going to allow JavaScript? Are we going to allow JS? Right now it's set to true. I'm going to say false. Then it's going to say, do you want to be in strict mode? And right now it says false. I'm going to change this to true. So what's going to happen now is it's going to flag any file that's not TypeScript. But this setting is really helpful if you're working on a larger project that you want to convert to TypeScript. You don't have to convert the whole thing all at once. You can migrate pieces over slowly and sprinkle TypeScript throughout your project. Now here on line 10, this determines how strict TypeScript is. Strict actually means safer and is a shortcut for 7 other different options. But if strict is set to true, then it automatically sets all 7 options to true as well. But you could set strict to false and selectively choose which of those features you want to turn on and off. Now, I'm not going to go through every option here, but if you're curious about what they mean, I'll include a link to a dev.to article within the episode description that does a great job of explaining each of these options. So for now, I'm just going to mark strict to true. And now it's going to crack down on our JavaScript file. So don't let that intimidate you. I've actually found it to be helpful because then it will tell you exactly what you need to do and you can let the error messages guide you. And that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to let the error messages guide us and tell us what needs to be updated in our project. So the first thing let's do as we're working through our project is let's just go ahead and change all of our files to use a .ts or .tsx extension since we set that within our TS config. Now our underscore app, and this should actually be .tsx because we have our component inside. We have our index.tsx. Perfect. Now I'm going to switch over to the terminal within VS Code so that I can see my terminal directly in VS Code and I'm not having to switch back and forth between VS Code and Warp. So now I'm going to say yarn dev and it should get our project up and running. So now let's pull up localhost 3000. Looks like our player is still there the way we want it to, which is great. But you can tell from our file here that we already have a lot of red lines. So let's start within our underscore app.tsx file. And here it's saying that there is a binding element component that implicitly has an any type. So what's happening here is that it doesn't understand what type our page props in our component need to be. So in TypeScript, you can have implicit and explicit types. An implicit type is when TypeScript is able to figure out what type it is based on the context. So for example, it knows that const, my number equals 42, is a number because 42 is a number. It knows that const, my name equals Amy Dutton. Well, my name is a string because Amy Dutton is a string. Or const is awesome equals true. Is awesome is a Boolean because true is a Boolean value. Of course, you can also be explicit about these types and say that is awesome is a string equal to quotes, of course. But then if you set is awesome to true, it's going to throw an error and say that your types don't match. In our case with my app, it doesn't know what the type is for component or page props. It's implying that it could be any type or anything. And since we set strict to true within our tsconfig file, part of those settings says that it will not allow us to imply a type of any. Okay, so if we go back to our Next.js documentation and scroll on down, there should be a section, for our custom app. And here, Next has created some TypeScript for us that we can pass over to explain what component and page props are. So I'm going to copy this, come back over to VS Code. Now we want to keep our globals.css, but we can replace all of this. Now you're probably still seeing some errors. So right now it can't find this package next/app. And what's interesting is if you look over into the file explorer over here to find our node modules folder, it's not there. I believe, not 100% sure on this, that yarn 3 is handling this differently and putting everything inside of this .yarn file. Because if I open this up to our cache, you can see what looks like a bunch of node modules. And actually, while we're here, we should go into our .getignore and add .yarn to the bottom of this file. Now, I would prefer to be able to see my node modules folder. And so what I can do is I can create a new file over here called .yarn_rc.yaml, where this will allow me to specify some yarn settings. So inside here, I'm going to say node linker and set that to node modules and give that a save. So now if I hit Control C to stop my server and I'm going to say yarn install, it should create that node modules folder and install all of the dependencies there. Cool. So now if I say yarn dev and get my server back up and running, and let's come back over to my _app.tsx file, it was now able to find that app props definition within the next app package. Cool. Now, let me minimize my terminal. And if we start going through some of these files, like our audio player, you're going to start to see some TypeScript errors. Now, real quick, your error messages might look different than mine. You might just have this red squiggly line. I'm running a VS Code extension called Error Lens that will highlight the entire line red and then display the error message to the side of it. So I know this drives some people crazy, but personally, I like that it's hard to ignore. Now let's go into our next file. So I'm going to step into our index.tsx file. Now, this might surprise you, but there aren't any errors in this file. There's nothing else that needs to be done, and we're running TypeScript. Pretty cool, right? Now, just to double check, I know I minimized my terminal down here, but I'm going to pull this back up. There is also a problems panel, and this will give you an outline of all the errors and things that need to be fixed. So for example, if we jump over to our audio player component, you can see that there are 8 problems within this particular file. So the first error here is it's saying the binding element chapters implicitly has an any type. And this is very similar to the error that we saw within our app directory, except this time we need to define what each of those props are. And we can do that with an interface or a type. These two concepts are very similar and do a lot of the same thing. You can find a bunch of different arguments all over the internet advocating for each. From the research I've done, apparently the difference used to be more clear, but as TypeScript has evolved, the lines have gotten blurrier. Interfaces are a great way to describe data shapes like an object, and spoiler alert, that's what we have here. Interfaces are great for extending data where you can take an existing interface and add on. Types, on the other hand, are great for defining a type of data, and I'll generally reach for a type if it's a smaller piece of data that I'm trying to define within an interface. So I'm going to minimize this and let's add some code here. Now, since we're dealing with an object here, I'm going to reach for an interface and I'm going to call this props since we're dealing with our components props. Now, the first element that we want to define is our chapters. And this is an array. So technically we could just say chapters with square brackets and be done. But let's be a little bit more specific and say that this is an array of objects. Inside of our object, we'll have a start time and an end time. And both of these are going to be numbers. Next up, we have our time jump. And this is also going to be a number. And then lastly, we have our track URL, which is going to be a string. Perfect. So now we need to connect this to our props object down here because our error still exists. We need to tell it that this object is type of props. Perfect. So now I'm going to define these default values. Now, not every prop will necessarily have a default value. So by default, our chapters is going to be an empty array. And our time jump, let's set that to 0 by default. Then our track should be a required prop. So I'm not going to set a default value for that. Now, here within our props, I need to specify that chapters and time jump are both optional. So I can do that by adding a question mark at the end of the name. So let's scroll down to the next error. And here you can see that we have a ref that's causing some problems. Now, our audio player is coming from our use audio player hook. So we're getting that here from our use audio player, and we're passing that in as a ref on our audio element. So to fix this, let's actually jump over to our hooks file. We have our audio player hooks, and let's check out where we are defining that. So here we have our references, and here we have our audio player. When we set these up, we're not defining a default value for any of these. So I'm actually going to set that to null. Now, if I save this and go back over to my audio player file, you'll see that TypeScript issue that we were having. Okay, let's keep scrolling down. Our next error here is related to our CSS properties. Now, if we hover over this squiggly here to see the entire error, it's saying that our custom CSS property is not assignable to this particular type that it's expecting. So it's not recognizing this particular object that we're passing in. So we can help it out by saying that it should recognize this object as react.css properties. Now, if you're curious about how I figured that out, I'll be honest, sometimes this involves a Google, but this is also a great use case for GitHub Copilot. So I pay $10 a month and I use it all the time. Not only does this give you fantastic IntelliSense, but you also have access to chat directly within VS Code. So one of the things that we can do, so I'm going to hide this real quick and get rid of our statement here. And if we hover back over the error message, you can actually copy this particular message, then come into chat and say, I'm getting this error. I'm going to paste in my error and I'm going to ask it, how do I fix it? Now, 8 times out of 10, it will do a great job explaining what the error message is and how to fix it. So it's saying that it's not recognizing the CSS variables. And to fix it, we can cast this style object to react.css properties. And then it will show you the code block here. So we can copy and paste this in. So I'm going to save this. And if we close this, so it just sees the files that are open, you can see that we have no more problems within our audio player component. Cool. Now let's take a look at our index.tsx file. We actually looked at this earlier, but now that we've defined the types within our audio player.tsx file, it looks like we are having an error, and you can see there is one problem. So if we jump down to this and hover over our problematic code, it's saying that the type string is not assignable to a type of number. So what's happening here is that T is coming from up here. It's taking the router, grabbing the URL, and looking to see if we're passing in a parameter of T in the URL to be able to set our jump link. And so when it grabs that from the router, this is a string. But when we defined our audio player, we said that our time jump needs to be a number. So there is a type mismatch here. So we can cast or change T from a string into a number by wrapping it with this number function. So now all of our types match. So the last file that we need to update is within our hooks directory. We have our audio player hooks. I just want to point out that this is a .ts file because we don't have any JSX inside. So our problems panel is saying that there are 21 problems. Fun times. Okay. Actually, once we start solving some of these problems, others will automatically be resolved. And spoiler alert, we'll find a few places in the code that might introduce some errors. And TypeScript will help us catch those and improve our code, which is definitely one of the reasons why I like it. So if we start here at the top, we have our use states and we're passing in default values for each of these. So TypeScript is able to infer the type for each of these because we're passing in false. It knows that is playing is a Boolean. Or duration and current time and time jump, these are all numbers because we're setting the default value to 0. Now with our useRefs here, we can specify which type each ref is referring to. So our audio player is referencing our actual audio tag. And there's a built-in type that references our HTML element. So inside angle brackets here, I can say HTML audio element so that it knows that this reference is going to be an HTML audio element. And specifying this will just help us as we get further into the code because now it knows what audio player is. With our progress bar, this is referencing the input range HTML element. So same thing, we have a built-in type that knows all the properties and methods we have available. So again, I can just use angle brackets and say HTML input element. And same as before, we can still set null as the default value. Now for our last ref, we have animation ref. And this is being used within our play function. So I'm going to collapse this down just a little bit and let's jump down to our play function. You can see here that we're referencing our animation ref.current. And we're setting that to the value that request animation frame returns. And if we hover over this, you can see that it's going to pass back a number. So we know now that animation ref should be a number. So if I come back up here to the top and inside of angle brackets here, we can say that this is a number. Now by default, I actually don't want this to be null. I want to give it a number. Now let's keep scrolling down and take a look at our use effect. So this is the first place where we really have an error. So the first problem that it says is that here our audio player.current is possibly null. So it's saying there's a chance that our audio player reference might not have been assigned to anything. And that's actually a requirement. It has to exist in order for our code to work. So there are a few ways that we could fix this. We could wrap this with a conditional to say that if our audio player exists and we're checking for current, and we could wrap our code with this. You can see that that message went away. But as I said, the audio player is a reference and it has to exist in order for everything else to work. So we can insist that this exists, our audio player exists, by adding an explanation point to the end of current. So it's saying that audio player cannot be undefined. So same thing here on line 26. It's saying that our progress bar could possibly be null. Well, this has to exist in order for everything else to work. Now, as soon as I change that, you'll notice that our error message actually changed. It's saying that we have a type of number that is being assigned to a string. So since we said that our progress bar is an HTML input element, it knows that this has to be a string. So we can fix it by casting seconds here to a string. So we can do that by saying dot to string. Now on line 27, we have loaded metadata. And if we hover over this, it's saying that it does not exist on the type HTML audio element. So see how helpful that is? By specifying it's an HTML audio element, it tells us that that actually doesn't exist. Did you mean on loaded metadata? So it looks like this was an error on my part, and this should be on loaded metadata instead. Again, this is one of those reasons why I really love TypeScript. It's smart enough that it can catch errors like this one within your code. Okay, let's scroll on down a little bit further here on line 38. It's saying that sex implicitly has an any type, meaning it doesn't know what to expect. So we can update our code to say that you can expect us to pass in a number. Now let's keep scrolling on down. Here on line 47, we have a problem where it's saying that the audio player is possibly null. So this is similar to the error message that we saw before. So we're going to insist that our audio player is going to exist. Going to scroll on down and same issue here. Audio player current is possibly null. So we can add our explanation points to say that yes, it exists. We can also add them here on line 63. Okay, now we still have another issue here where it's saying that the type of number is not assignable to a type of string. So same as before, we need to cast this to a type of string, and now our error message will go away. Now on line 69, let's come on down. It's saying that our audio player.current is possibly null. So we're going to insist that that exists. And again, we're having a type mismatch where here it is expecting a number and we're passing it a string. So what we can do in this case is we can cast our string into a number. Okay, now let's keep coming down. Here with our progress bar.current, saying that it's possibly null. We're going to insist that these exist. Now we're still getting an error here. And if we look at this, it says that the left-hand side of our equation must be of type any, number, big, int, or enum type. So we can cast this into a number, and now our error message is going to go away. And here it's saying that a type of string is not assignable to a number. So let's convert this as well into a number. Okay, on line 79 here, it's saying that it's possibly null. So let's insist that this does exist. And then if we come down to 86, it doesn't know what type new time is. So let's tell it that it is a number. We're going to insist that our progress bar.current.value does exist. Okay, now we're getting a new error that says our type number cannot be assignable to a string. So let's convert new time to a string. Now let's check this out within the browser to make sure that everything is working. So I'm going to pull up my terminal down here and it looks like our server is running. So I'm going to pull this up within the browser and hit refresh. Now, the only weird thing that I see out of the gate is that we have a pause button here, but the player is already paused. So we should see a play button. If you pull up the Chrome Developer Tools, you'll see that we have this error here where Chrome prevents the audio from playing because the user hasn't interacted with the document just yet. And if you click on this provided link, you'll see that there's more information here. So let's fix this by going back into VS Code. And if we look at our audio player hooks.ts file, if we scroll up to the top here on line 18 and 19 inside the useEffect hook, we have set is playing to true and we call the play function. So if we just get rid of this and hit save, this should resolve the problem. So I'm going to come back over to Chrome. Let's hit refresh. So now we see an actual play button and our audio player is not automatically playing, which is exactly what we want. Now, this is interesting. It's automatically jumping to 38 seconds, even though I'm not passing a time in through the URL. Now, if I change the URL and say question t equals 40, it is jumping to the 40-second mark. Or if I change this to 10, it jumps to the 10-second mark. So that's all working. But if I don't pass a parameter in at all, it should be set to 0 and not to 38. So what's happening? Let's debug this. Let's go back over to VS Code, and inside of our audio player hooks file, we have our time jump here. Let's console.log our time jump out to see exactly what value it's seeing. So I'm going to come back over to Chrome. Okay, let's hit refresh, and you can see that time jump is set to 0. And then it's also saying NaN, or not a number. So this is strange because within TypeScript, we're forcing it to be a number. What is happening? Let's come back over to VS Code and let's jump up a level. So I'm going to go over to my index.tsx file where we're actually calling our audio player component. And I want to see exactly what we're passing in as our time jump. So I'm going to scroll up here and let's add a console.log to see exactly what t is. So I'm going to save this, come back over to Chrome. And now if I give this a refresh, you can see it's setting t to undefined because we're not specifying anything within the URL. That gets passed over to our component and it's set by default to 0. But when it looks at what we've passed in from our component, it sees that as undefined. Well, undefined is not a number. So we can fix this. Let's go back to our code and look at our audio player component. If we scroll up to the top, it is looking for time jump. So once time jump changes, then it is setting that time jump state. So let's wrap this with a conditional to say that if time jump exists, then you can set it. So if it's undefined, it's not going to run this line of code. So now if we come back over to Chrome and hit refresh, you can see that that jumps to 0 because we're not passing anything in. We can still try this out to say t equals 40 and it jumps to the correct spot. If we get rid of that, it starts back at 0 where we want it to be. I think that takes care of all the errors and issues we were having. And maybe surprisingly, this exercise showed some of the harder pieces of TypeScript, but hopefully you started to see some of its benefits. It keeps our types in check and puts up guardrails to help us write better code. In the next video, we're going to create a new player style, one that has a waveform. And the cool part about this is we've already done a lot of the heavy lifting by creating a hook library and adding TypeScript. So it becomes really easy to use the same logic and functionality and attach it to a new interface. Done. If you like this video and want to see more videos on web design and development, be sure to hit the subscribe button below. Hit the bell icon to receive notifications when new videos are posted. Until then, keep coding. Wasn't too bad.